Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me today is Christopher Skinner. Christopher is a mathematician, computational linguist, connecting business metrics to the psychology of his employees and customers. Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, Christopher Skinner.
Ed, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So first, Christopher, why do you do what you do?
I have always been fascinated with putting people first. And this goes back 25 years of why is digital not more customer-centric? Why is it not more people-centric? And I've spent a lifetime in business trying to figure out ways to get ahead of this problem, which just seems to be systemic everywhere.
And one of the things I know you talk a lot about is the use of language connection to CRM data and really discovering why people buy long in advance of you ever finding out. So talk a little bit about that.
So one of the things that I discovered way back in the early days of search engines, we were always fascinated with why does somebody type in Paris in a search engine? And what are they looking for, really? How can you uncover what people really want? How do you become more people-centric as a search engine? And it was really hard to solve. So I went down the path of what's called language psychology, which is the deep understanding of what do you really mean behind the language. So as a person, we start out life on a bridge, like we're walking across a ravine, if you will, on a rope bridge. And we are influenced by the people around us. We're influenced by people we don't like. And along the way of life, we inherit language, verbs. Forget about the nouns. They don't mean anything. But when you think about verbs, articles, prepositions, pronouns, articles, they give clues as to who we really are as people. Like, if you're honest, you're going to inherit certain language characteristics. And so the things you do in your life influence language, or is it language influence what you do? But anyway, it goes back to your personality. And so how can you actually serve people better by understanding who they are without ever asking them a single question? Don't interfere with the experiment. That's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? The minute you start asking questions, there's bias, you got problems. So I was fascinated with connecting the psychology of people by estimating people's personality by looking at the things that they do in their life. And so to give you an example, a scuba diver tends to use certain verbs very different than, say, somebody that jumps out of an airplane with a parachute. Crazy as it sounds. And then you look at the other things that they do in their life, and it either confirms or denies the language set, the common language set of people. And that can be determined and inferred. And if you understand people psychologically, you can produce better products, you can market better, you can get to better sales, honestly. It's not as wide casting as what digital marketing is. And most important, you build a better product to solve the needs of people through language, understanding language.
Sure. There's so many places I could go here. The one question that came to my mind as you were talking is it just a matter of verb choice, or is it the voice with which you use? So, for example, if you're using the active voice versus the passive voice, is that a big influence?
It certainly can be, but you can certainly do other things like look at the space between our conversation. You could see how well we react to. You can look at a lot of different things, but what I find is the language set we are using is all I need. It's so much better than any other way that I've discovered to connect who we are and how to better find things that make our life better. Um, when you add, for instance, when you add language to, when you study language and then you map it back to large data sets, large CRMs. In fact, I've mapped it back to the entire country, representing about 95% of the economy. You discover how complicated people are. People are unique. And if what happens, unfortunately, is in the world is we have inherent bias. We try to average as humans. The great Clayton Christensen said once time that God does not average. God does not need to average. God can look at the individual. That's Clayton Christensen, but he's right. When you look, for instance, at dog owners, there are so many varieties of why you own a dog. There's so many different reasons why you might own a particular make and model of a car. There's so many factors. So you end up with, I would call it these personality states that can be in the dozens or it can be in the hundreds. Now, as a marketer, you've got the challenge, oh my gosh, I can't make 100 different creatives, but please don't make one. That's the big problem. When you average to one size fits all, you get average results.
So, a question that has perplexed a number of people, and I've heard vastly different opinions on this, is what voice to write on your website. Should you say we da 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 or you as a customer will? Any
Whew.
thoughts on that?
Don't use too much of anything. I don't know. That's an interesting thing. One of the challenges with writing styles is you don't want to try to pretend you're somebody you're not, because that will come through. The type of technology we're talking about, you can reverse. I mean, as a human, we can detect these things. We can detect that doesn't sound right. It's built into our brain and our psychology. So trying to paint outside the lines too far as a person, as a business, watch it. Be careful. Can you make adjustments that make you better? Yes. Can I find all the time that to answer your question, I'll give you a hint. If you use too much we, um, third person, you're coming across as cold, impersonal. You have to be careful with those we's. If you use too many I's, it's a sign of depression. This is well understood university research for the last 150 years. So those are things that you can watch out for. But I'm a big fan of being authentic. Like you want to write from a point of view of be quite authentic. I like to recommend to people go sit in a field of, you know, tall grass for a day and to leave the computer behind and just one piece of paper and a pen. And who are you? What are you trying to truly do? And that is going to come through that authenticity. Who you really are as a business or a person is going to be much more profound than small adjustments. So it's always something to be careful of.
And Christopher, we have an exit question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, who is a hero of yours and why are they a hero?
Well, my biggest hero is my dad because when I think about, he recently passed, but when I think about, he got me started. My first investor, mentored me for, ugh, you know, 4 or 5 decades, you could say. Uh, and I'm quite appreciative of that. He didn't teach me everything. People like James Pennebaker and Clayton Christensen, Bob Moesta are big influences in my life, and I consider them all heroes. But it was absolutely my father who set the stage. I was quite privileged.
And lastly, Christopher, how can somebody contact you?
Best way, email or website, christopherskinner.com. And my email address is letter C at christopherskinner.com.
All right. Christopher Skinner, thanks so much for being a guest on the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ed. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. This is a great podcast you put together.
Review and subscribe by searching your podcast player of choice for Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.